Hello and welcome back to the Movie Memo Recaps. Today we are going to recap a 2012 movie titled Here Comes the Boom. Please be advised that there will be spoilers ahead. In the opening scene, we are introduced to Scott, a 42-year-old biology teacher at Wilkinson High School, dissatisfied and bored. Because he overslept, he is obliged to enter the classroom through the window, but his attempt to avoid attracting attention fails because Principal Betcher is already present. As punishment for his tardiness, Scott is assigned to bus duty after school. This upsets him, and he pays little attention to his students. After violently taking some goodies from the vending machine, he watches the music class and gets an idea. Marty concludes the lecture with the phrase, "Without music, life would be a mistake." Scott approaches him and fabricates a tale to put Marty on bus duty, but he is busy with the news that his wife is pregnant. Later, Betcher notifies everyone about proposed budget cuts. The school cannot afford to maintain extracurricular activities, including the music department, which would result in Marty being dismissed. Scott steps in and begs Betcher to give Marty a break because he is expecting a child, which was meant to remain a secret. After finding that the school requires $48,000 to continue the music program, Scott advises that they raise the funds. Marty contacts Scott the next day and expresses gratitude for his decision to gather funds for the music program. Scott attempts to back out, but Marty keeps elevating him, so he must persevere. They had scheduled a meeting with all of the teachers to help gather funds, but only the school nurse, Bella, attends. When Marty tries to round up the other teachers, Scott informs Bella that raising that much money is impossible, but she refuses to give up on Marty because he is a wonderful person. He seizes the chance to make a move on her, but she simply sighs. This isn't his first try. So he proposes that she join him for dinner if he can dunk the ball into the net. She agrees, believing that he will undoubtedly fail due to his physique. Sneaky Scott uses a little trampoline and jumps with appropriate distance, but he fails to dunk the ball. Later that day, Scott pays a visit to his carefree brother and asks if he has any additional work at his workplace, but they had just laid off 2 employees. To supplement his income, Scott works night shifts and runs a citizenship exam preparation course. After class, he receives his salary, and one of his students, Nico, approaches him about additional tutoring. Scott feels bad about turning him down, so he tries to help him, which makes Nico happy. Scott later meets Nico in his flat and discovers that he is a martial arts coach who has competed in the UFC. Before they begin tutoring, he invites him to watch a sport. Nico's friend mentions that the loser of the fight made $10,000, which surprises Scott. Nevertheless, if he had won, he would have made $50,000. That's when an idea struck him. The next day, Scott suggests to Marty that he will participate in a fight. He mentions that he was a terrific wrestler in college and can take a beating, implying that he would fight to lose. Marty hesitates but eventually agrees. Scott declares his intention to leave the citizenship exam preparation class. Outside of class, he asks Nico to train him for the upcoming martial arts event in exchange for Scott tutoring him. Nico reluctantly agrees and informs him of a fight that would take place that week, in which Scott must participate. The next day, Scott works out with Marty in his basement. When they take a break, Marty advises Scott on how to defeat his opponent before the battle even starts. When Scott asks how, he responds with a peculiar musical tune that strikes dread in the hearts of his opponents. Delusional. Scott arrives at the MMA's lowest level. Nico is astonished but sees his drive. Yeah, and he is the next fighter. He wears a quirky suit that is designed to be threatening, and he enters the ring to the tune Here Comes the Boom. His opponent appears to be here for the same reason, to lose. The audience is enthusiastic. Unfortunately, the struggle lasted barely 2 seconds, and he was whisked away by medics, but he earned $750. Later, Bella chastises him for his dumb decision to fight in a cage, and he tries to make another pass at her, unsuccessfully. He then goes to Marty's house, and because he is not home, his wife lets him in. Scott discovers that Marty did not inform her that he would lose his job, which puts even more pressure on him to raise the $48,000. The next day, Scott pays a visit to Nico, who is teaching a disco street fight at work. Nico assures him that what they are learning here is exactly what he would need in the cage. He teaches him defense and escape methods from chokeholds. It goes without saying that Scott is an amateur. After this epiphany, Nico tells him they'll just have to wing it and returns to teaching his next lesson. Scott is beaten badly in his second MMA battle, but he survives until the 3rd round. Then it begins to rain, and both boxers are unable to maneuver effectively, making the entire battle look foolish and ultimately resulting in Scott losing. Back at school, Scott collects the students' tests when Malia, his brightest student, fails to answer 3 questions. He wonders what the problem is. It comes out that her father wants her to abandon music because he wants her to help him at the restaurant, and she is just demotivated. On the way to the next fight, Scott tutors Nico and discovers that Marty forgot to bring him his lunch, but that's okay because he has applesauce. Nico gives him a motivational talk before the fight, and they hear their opening music a bit early. It turns out that his opponent performs the same song, but his entrance is far more spectacular. Scott argues they can't have the same song since it's awkward and asks Marty to change it. When Marty goes to meet the DJ, he switches the tune to some classical nonsense, and their arrival could not be less stunning and embarrassing. The fight begins with Scott taking a beating as usual, not defending himself, and Nico simply yelling at him to follow the game plan. Scott has had enough with defense. When his opponent takes a minute to brag about having already won the fight, Scott knocks him out with a right hook. Scott eventually achieved his first victory. Finally, applesauce was served. Scott has become well known at school, not for the fight itself, but for what happened afterwards. Malia considers him a hero for his efforts to save the music program. Student expectations are placed on him, which motivates him. Later, Bella treats his wounds and discovers that he has earned $3,000 from the fights thus far. She adds the $72 from the bake sale. He attempts to ask her out again, but she rejects him. Later, Nico is training Scott, who is angry that he is only teaching him how to protect himself. He likes to attack. If he wins battles, he will fight less. Nico agrees. He introduces Scott to a friend, Guy, who wants him to fight both of his opponents at the same time to determine whether Scott is worth his time. He takes a good beating, a really good beating. Nico and his companions simply laugh it off, and he summons another of his friends to have some fun with Scott. As three of them beat Scott up in the corner, he refuses to give up and requests to continue. This confirms to Guy that he can train Scott. The next day at school, Becher summons Scott. Malia's father is furious that he instructed his daughter to disobey him. Becher also claims that he is fighting in a cage, inciting risky behavior, and embarrassing the institution. Scott defends himself, reassuring Malia's father and stating that he is working to improve the school environment. He storms off to class after telling Becher that he is neglecting his obligations as principal. Scott resolves to take his duty as a teacher seriously, but the class has a preconceived notion that he does not care. He goes up on the desk, captures everyone's attention, and begins presenting biology in an engaging manner. The students adore it. Bella hears the commotion in the corridor and is delighted to see Scott so goofy. He continues his training on the bleachers with Marty, while Malia tutors Nico for the citizenship test and devises a plan to teach him the answers through song. Nico thinks she's great. Scott wins several battles and pays the proceeds to Becher's counselor. His classes are going well, and he is not slacking off in his training. Guy teaches him everything he knows about offense, but some battles don't go well. The news that he is fighting for a noble cause spreads rapidly around the campus. Marty is likewise thrilled, and Becher's counselor can't believe they're doing this. Scott's fighting style captures Joe Rogan's attention. Scott, feeling secure, invites Bella to supper at his house, and she eventually agrees. His brother prepares an exquisite supper for them. Bella adores it, but when Scott claims to have prepared it, she detects deception but claims that the supper is indeed excellent. After taking some wine glasses, Scott tries to show her some MMA maneuvers. That results in a staged fight in which Bella pounces on him, which you'd think would lead to intimacy, but she uses it as a cue to leave. The next day, Scott thanks his brother for the supper and offers him a job. Guy seeks out Scott at school to inform him of the news. Joe Rogan called and offered him a bout in the UFC for $10,000 if he loses. However, Nico declined, so Scott pays him a visit at his yoga class. They are $6,000 short of their objective of 48. This may be a one and done, but Nico believes it is too dangerous. He had declined the fight for personal reasons, having suffered a career-ending injury while prepping for a UFC battle, but he knows that Scott deserves it and has promised to arrange the fight. Malia's father compliments Scott, since his business is flourishing better than ever. Scott and Nico meet Joe and go over the details of the fight. Scott's brother is now the chef at Malia's father's restaurant. Joe has heard Scott's reasons for fighting and believes he is very chivalrous, so he grants him this opportunity. Nico thinks Scott is prepared, and the two arrange to meet in Vegas for the battle. At the airport, they are overjoyed to be so near to their destination. Marty's wife is grateful beyond words. They rush to the jet and eventually arrive in Vegas, the city of dreams. They share a cheesecake, with Nico eating more than he can handle. They start a food battle while Scott receives a call from Bella notifying him of the school's misappropriation. The assistant stole all of the money they gathered for the music program, and Bella begs him to return, but he cannot back down now. Scott's opponent is a tough, dangerous fighter. Marty is devastated by the revelation of the embezzlement, but Scott does not give up. His plan is to win the fight and receive $50,000. When the battle is ready to begin, instead of "Here Comes the Boom," the song changes. Malia has arrived with the school's music band to cheer him up. Bella has sorted everything with Joe's aid. The biology teacher is making his UFC debut. Everyone is looking at him with interest. The confrontation between Ken, the executioner, and Scott, the biology teacher, appears to be unfair. As the overseer reads the guidelines, Scott's tone softens as he surveys the music classroom. He's got something to fight for. Nico advises Scott to lose as soon as possible to avoid injury, but that's when he admits he's won the battle. Ken disrespects Scott immediately away.
He took some bombs in that round. Fight! Round 2 underway. Checks the kick. Oh, he gets reversed! Get your hands up! Pull down! Don't stop!
Listen to me, you gotta stay away from him.
Slipping shots now, Mike. Look at this! The big left! He's all over us! Big high shot! Finish him! Come on!
Scott is the winner. Unbelievable, a biology teacher wins a UFC fight. Scott and Bella ultimately exchange kisses through the cage. The music program has been saved, Marty is pleased, and Betcher is appreciative to Scott for his generous donation. Nico and the rest of the students have gotten citizenship, bringing the movie to the end. Thanks for watching. If you are new, don't forget to subscribe for more of these recaps. Until next time, have a nice day.